The New South Wales Transport Minister, Andrew Constance, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Head of Uber for Business, Georgia Foster, welcome. And the Managing Director of Consumer Business at carsales.com, AJ Bahati.
Thank you.
Welcome all. First up, Georgia, I have to start with you. Uber Elevate, flying cars. I thought it was a joke. Was it Marty McFly? It's always been a joke. 2015, we were going to have them. That passed. It's 2019. Everyone went, yeah. Really?
It's pretty exciting, isn't it?
But we are serious here. It's not just a marketing exercise. Let's put a few nice videos up, but it'll be...
No, we are serious here. My mantra has always been ask why and do different. And I think I'm in the perfect company because we've been doing ground transport really well for a long period of time now in the tech years. And certainly now asking the question of why can't we do this in the air?
And why can't we? I mean, how long? How long?
Yeah, well, we have launched in Dallas and in LA, and so we've got the first pilots on the ground next year. We're looking at 2023 for commercial passengers. So there's still some time off and there's still a lot of work to do, and but, you know, we are short.
We heard there, Australia, there's one other international destination,
there is,
Australia. Yeah. I'll take a stab at it. Is it Melbourne and Sydney that are in the running? Can you give us a hint who's ahead?
Melbourne and Sydney are both shortlisted. We're pretty excited that Australia... No, unfortunately, I don't even know. We will have an answer by the end of the month, which is pretty exciting.
OK, Andrew Constance.
Well, I'm happy to put a hand up.
Yeah, I hope you have put your hand up.
I remind you, we were the first to legislate you and make you real in terms of Australia, so we're really keen. But all said and done, you know, there's some challenges. You've got CASA to deal with, you've got...
Well, that's it. You haven't just got road rules, you've got air rules.
And, you know, I think the challenge in all of this is that, like with driverless trains, which we've just moved into Sydney, you know, drones are out delivering pizzas, starting to have a real impact across our community, and to transport people, we're not going to need pilots. It's going to be an incredible change for our community. It's very exciting, and Uber's leading the way.
But I just wonder on that, though, because, to be frank, governments, not necessarily saying yours, but governments have a problem with just conventional old cars on the road. Drones are another added problem. People flying around, does that just fill you with dread?
No. No, absolutely not. You can't think like that. I mean...
No, I know. I'm thinking from a political point of view. Oh, God, there's a nightmare.
There's less dimensions to collide with if you're in the air in a funny way.
Well, not if it takes off.
Well, true. But, I mean, the reality is that transport is a technology business and has been for a long time. And we're really starting to think differently about the way we live, the way we move, and... You know, to be able to utilise drones in this way is phenomenal. So it's very exciting.
I must say that we've had, you know, Australians, the public and the government have been really great to embrace ride sharing, one of the better countries in the world. And so I think that we are primed for a great opportunity to be really innovative in the air. And so far, from what I've seen, the collaboration with government and CASA have been absolutely quite incredible.
AJ, do people really want this? Because we're not even at the where we just sort of we'll get to electric cars and autonomous vehicles next. We thought we'd start with the one, we're going to start there and go backwards. We're hearing that it is a reality, but is there a huge demand or is it just a novelty thing, do you think?
I think technology has an interesting way of skipping a couple of versions, and sometimes autonomous cars are very, very complicated, and one of the reasons they're complicated is we're in an open environment. We're working with other drivers who drive erratically, and the air is a very interesting environment because it's controlled, unlike land. So I'm a big believer in at some stage we'll have flying autonomous cars. We might have flying autonomous cars before we have open land autonomous cars.
Is that true, that we'll see them in the air before we see them on the ground? Because, I mean, if you go to California, there's autonomous cars working there. Why would we jump it and go to flying first?
It's a possibility, but safety's the #1 priority, whether you're talking about road or air. And I think that there's still some collaboration that needs to occur in order for air to be, you know, safe if we're going to put people into the air. So I certainly think, though, that there's an opportunity for huge advantages by having people in the air instead of on the road.
And are these just drones for ride sharing, or are we talking... Are you going to be able to have individual ones? Where are we going?
I think we're talking about different types of vehicles, actually. So Uber Air utilises eVTOL technology, which is electric vertical takeoff and landing technology.
They're like a helicopter that goes up?
Like a helicopter in a way, but with many differences. So it's actually quieter, It's an opportunity to make it more affordable, and actually it's safer. So
we're not talking Blade Runner here. We've all got our own.
No.
We've got one. Well,
Helicopters use, one rotor, so there's actually a single point of failure, whereas eVTOL uses multiple rotors, so it is safer.
Andrew, we're going to talk about the regulatory issues on all of this, electric cars, autonomous vehicles, flying vehicles, obviously. But you're obviously excited. You're with the plan on flying vehicles. But what I said before about the headaches, do you sort of, seriously, when you're talking about congestion, it solves one problem, but does it create others?
Well, I think I use this phrase that governments can get Ubered, and that is because their regulatory and in many ways, their licensing systems and the oversight, the compliance, all the red tape, means that our legislation has to be more agile, and we've got to be forward-thinking. And even our Passenger Transport Act, up until many years, didn't even enable ride-sharing, which is just crazy if you think about it today. So for us, it's about staying ahead of the trends, getting out of the way, taking the risks, but doing it in a safe way. And
you can't even get a curfew past 10 o'clock at Sydney Airport. How are you going to manage with this?
Well, don't get me started on that as a country member. But, look, there's no doubt. I mean, autonomous vehicles. I sat in an autonomous vehicle on the streets of San Francisco 18 months ago. The car drove itself on a Saturday morning. A bunch of Australian entrepreneurs, actually. Zoox is the company. And they're looking at a very different model in terms of delivery. It's not just one of the car manufacturers here. They're looking at a completely different service model, which is very different to what we're used to. And you're purchasing your mobility as a service. You don't own the vehicle, which is going to be the trend. And what's exciting about all this is our streetscapes, our suburbs, our cities are going to change dramatically. So with Uber Elevate, we've actually even got to think about how we might change the urban interface, where the drones will land, how they will land. Will they land at metro stations into the future? Will they land at Parliament House? All these things, it's going to be very, very different.
I just wonder, just take it that they're similar to a helicopter. I know there's differences, but why don't people just get helicopters everywhere? I mean, that was going to solve the problem. You'd be able to just land, go around, take all these people, and that didn't take off.
Well, the one big difference, there's two big differences. The one big difference between helicopters and these drones is they're smart. So helicopters are dumb devices. Helicopters need to be flown by a person. With drones, they're programmable. They're like your smartphone. You download a different software every day and the drone upgrades itself, just like Tesla upgrades itself. So that's a major difference between what you can do with a drone versus what you can do with a helicopter, is you can program it.
So, Georgia, I just want to get through the logistics of this. How high are we looking? Are we talking literally like the movies that we will sit there watching people, you can see them there? Are we talking how high? What is this going to look like? You're talking only a couple of years away. What's the early stage of flying vehicles going to look like?
Yeah, look, I think that comes down to discussions that we have with CASA, and which is a regulatory body around this. There's lots of experts in America working on this that are ex-NASA, and they're probably more well-equipped to talk about the distance and the height that they'll travel at than I will. But take, for example, the idea of being able to take your Uber Air from the top of your office building. It's an 8-kilometre journey to Sydney Airport, for example. It takes you about an hour in peak hours at the moment, and we're talking under 9 minutes to get from that building to the airport.
But that's exactly what they do in Sao Paulo with choppers to avoid it. They just go chopper to the airport.
Choppers are a bit different in the sense that they actually, so the eVTOLs actually go straight up, drive across and go straight down. Don't get me started on how they actually work, but certainly a lot more effective if we're talking about areas, especially in CBDs.
To add to that, Aeromobile, which it's a major company in flying cars, they're developing cars that can both drive on the road as well as fly. So in the first version is certainly a drone that doesn't drive on the road, but the second version that's coming in, they're estimating 5 to 7 years. This is a car that you can drive on the road as well as fly.
We keep talking about drones, but these are obviously drones that can take people. There are a lot of people who are already worried that there's too many drones out there. They became cheap. They're a security threat. These are things that a government has to look at. I mean, it's great you're embracing new technology and excited about it, but surely sometimes you have to err on the side of caution in these days?
Well, I mean, look, I think it generations that are forthcoming, they have a very different view of the world that I certainly did, 20 years ago. And it is a very different atmosphere for people today in terms of the way they grow up, their experience, even their attitudes towards privacy. We're seeing that in the online environment. So the way in which technology affects mobility, for many, I don't see that being so much the issue. I think drones, yes, I mean, if used inappropriately, do pose security challenges for governments and the wider community. But generally, I think if this technology is embraced, it's a larger scale of drone compared to what we're seeing in terms of pizza deliveries and those types of things, but it's going to be a very different mode, which will be, I think, embraced.
Yet in the US, there is a push to license, to regulate, to be a bit more careful because it's done. I mean, we're getting the same pressure here.
Yeah, I mean, invariably you will. I mean, but for my view is the government should be there just to provide a regulatory regime which is about community safety, but we don't necessarily need to be involved in, red tape to the point where you can't allow technology to flourish. We've done that before. It hasn't worked. And technology gets ahead of us all anyway, and we end up retrofitting legislation and regulation, and it's just silly. So governments have got to think differently in this space. So that's what I'm wanting to see. We've got a lot of engineers working in transport agencies around the world. We need futurists in many ways.
So I'm just going to clear this up. That's why I asked about, we keep referring to them as drones.
I was about to say.
Yes, they're not drones, are they? So we get a little confused here, but
we're not talking
about drones.
I'm
talking about flying vehicles. So they're drones with people, but they're not really.
No.
Okay.
They're not.
Give us some other logistics. So just the early ones we'll see. So we're not talking pie in the sky, because we've all seen it where companies, no offence, Georgia, talk it up. It looks great. The video's there. Let's get excited. And as poor old Marty McFly saw in Back to the Future in the 80s, 30 years, nothing happened. What will the ones that we're seeing now, what might they see at whichever city's lucky enough to get the pilot? What are they going to look like? How many people will they take? What will we see when we look up?
Yeah, and I think there's still a lot of work being done on that. They are a thing. They do exist.
They're a thing. You've heard it here.
And I think that, we're going to see even over the next year or so until we start actually taking flights in Dallas and LA, we will see some innovation in the technology as well. So I think that it's well worth sitting around and waiting for it to actually
You can't tell us how many they take? We're talking 2, 4? Is it Jetsons? Is it 8? Is it what?
Look, I would be speculating.
Okay. So it's
Dubai has trialled flying cars, and those cars only take one person.
Right.
But they have trialled it.
So they're more the Jetsons.
Yeah, they're more the Jetsons.
I think, Uber's idea about reducing congestion and helping cities move better is actually to put more people into fewer cars.
Well, we're going to get to that later, because there's an argument that Uber has caused a lot of this congestion. Sure. We'll talk about that in the last segment. But as a politician, as a transport minister, that must be just heaven to hear another solution to getting rid of congestion. We don't just have to pay for that Sydney Metro.
I mean, it's technology, in terms of the way, even just the way that the motorways work, into the future, how this works, because it's not just a case of, drones leaving from particular ports necessarily. I mean, people want personalised services, and they want to be able to get across cities without even necessarily having to think. And that's where it's all heading, and that's where the the flying motor vehicles are going to come into this. It will change another dynamic, and certainly in terms of the growth we're seeing in our cities across the world, and the impact of congestion socially and economically, this is definitely the right way to go.
Okay, I want to ask, just before we move on to the more conventional, modern, future, there's always a fear with these kind of new technologies. It's great that it's ride-sharing. You talked about Dubai and single ones. A lot of money in Dubai. Is there a fear that this will be something that's a rich person's plaything? And Elon Musk, is it the Tesla of the year? I mean, he's doing one, it's mixed with space, of course he'd be in it. But, yeah, is that the fear?
That is certainly the fear. It's the same fear with electric cars at the moment, but it takes time. Elon Musk has now released Tesla 3. Hyundai, I think it's Iconic, or I might get the name wrong. It's a $45,000 electric car. And the same thing will happen with flying cars too.
Because I think at the moment it's $250,000 or something, someone estimated.
It's 280,000 for one of the cheapest ones, yeah.
So this Dubai one, have you seen it flying? Have you seen the...
Yeah,
tell us what you've seen will look like.
What I've seen it looks like is it has 4 propellers. It unfortunately looks like a drone.
There you go.
It's not a drone, but it looks like a drone.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Talk sense.
It looks like a drone. One person can see a bit of a Jetsons thing, yeah.
Yeah. And Georgia, again, this issue, I mean, obviously Uber is about ride sharing, bringing costs down, but is there the fear until you can get it right where it's shared, it is a novelty thing? It's a bit like going on...
No, making it affordable's part of one of the top 3 objectives. And certainly, as I said before, getting more people into vehicles, whether they are eVTOL or whether they're on the roads, is high priority.
OK, and finally, Andrew Constance, unfortunately, as the Transport Minister, we've seen how long it took to get, and as you said, your government was innovative on innovation, but we saw how long it took, and many places are still arguing over Uber on the ground in a conventional, you know, combustion engine. How on earth do you think you get through the concerns, the NIMBYs, the people? I mean, I don't like drones going over my backyard. I'm not sure I need the bigger one there. You know, there is a lot. You might want innovation, but there's also the downside.
Yeah, I mean, look, as with any technology, there's always going to be those negatives and those positives which have to be ironed out. But if you look at the greater good and the very nature of what we're trying to achieve here in terms of the quality of life and the impact of travel, I mean, the number of hours on... Even with the opening of the new driverless train, the number of compliments we're getting online where people are saying, oh, I'm seeing my sweetheart for an extra, 6-7 hours a week.
I don't want to be negative, but the driverless trains had a few glitches at stops between stations. If a flying car goes, woof.
Well, but again, I think that the key element of this is that, I mean, look at the number of fatalities we're having on our roads. There is going to always be this challenge. I mean, the key interesting point in all of this is the national government, not the states. National governments are going to have to regulate an algorithm here at some point, and that's going to be a very interesting debate in terms of risk.